My beloved sisters, today's reminder is one that comes from a place of deep care for your dignity, your self-worth, and your future. The world around us will try to shape you into what it wants, but Allah has already shaped you into what you are meant to be. Strong, dignified, and purposeful. Unfortunately, too many have fallen into the trap of being soft, in the wrong way. Not the softness of mercy, kindness, and compassion that Islam encourages, but the softness that comes from weakness, lack of boundaries, and allowing people to misuse your heart, your time, and your faith. Islam calls you to be gentle yet firm, merciful yet principled, humble yet confident. A believing woman is not someone who lets others trample over her, but someone who knows her worth in the sight of Allah, and refuses to compromise it for the approval of people. Stop allowing society to tell you that in order to be loved or accepted, you must tolerate disrespect. Stop thinking that pleasing people at the cost of displeasing Allah will ever bring you peace. Your strength is not in being stubborn for your ego, but in standing firm for your deen, your values, and your self-respect. A soft heart should never mean a weak will. The Prophet's wives were soft in nature but firm in faith, and that balance made them role models for every woman until the end of time. Today, we are going to talk about how to stop being the wrong kind of soft, and instead embrace the kind of strength Allah loves. Strength wrapped in kindness, courage wrapped in patience, and firmness wrapped in mercy. Humility is a noble trait praised in the Quran and exemplified by the Prophet Muhammad, but too often it is misunderstood and misapplied, especially by those who confuse it with humiliation. Humility is a strength of character. It is the ability to lower oneself before Allah, to recognize that everything you have, everything you are, and every ability you possess comes from Him alone. It means acknowledging your dependence on Allah, treating others with kindness, and avoiding arrogance in speech, action, and thought. However, humility does not mean allowing people to mistreat you, strip away your dignity, or cross the limits that Allah has set for human interaction. Humiliation, on the other hand, is the state of being degraded, shamed, or oppressed by others in a way that strips you of the honor Allah has granted you. Allah created every human being with dignity, as mentioned in Surah Al-Isra, and we have certainly honored the children of Adam. This honor is inherent and should be safeguarded. When you confuse humility with humiliation, you start tolerating disrespect under the false impression that it is patience or piety. You allow people to take advantage of your kindness, manipulate your forgiving nature, and diminish your sense of self-worth, thinking you are doing it for the sake of Allah, when in fact Allah does not ask you to accept oppression. The Prophet taught us to help the oppressor and the oppressed, and when asked how to help the oppressor, he said, by preventing him from oppressing. This means standing up against wrong, even if it is done to you, is an act of righteousness. A humble woman is one who lowers herself before Allah, but stands tall before injustice. She speaks gently but firmly, refuses to be silenced when truth must be spoken, and walks away from situations that threaten her safety, faith, or dignity. She is aware of her worth, not in an arrogant way, but in recognition of the honor Allah has bestowed upon her as His servant. She does not engage in self-praise or superiority over others, yet she also does not shrink herself to fit the expectations of people who wish to see her small and powerless. She understands that the humility Islam teaches is about obedience to Allah and compassion to His creation, not about submitting to human cruelty, or becoming a doormat for those who exploit softness. Humility means knowing you are no better than the next person, but humiliation is when someone treats you as if you are worthless, and you accept it without resistance. Islam calls for dignity in all circumstances, and a believer is encouraged to carry themselves with grace, but also with the courage to say no when lines are crossed. The Prophet himself was the most humble of men, yet he never accepted degradation, or allowed others to abuse his character. He forgave easily, but he also confronted wrongdoing directly. This balance is what a woman must learn. To be humble in worship, humble in relationships, humble in service, but never to allow humility to be twisted into submission to injustice. When a woman understands this difference, she protects her heart from bitterness, her mind from confusion, and her soul from losing its sense of value. She becomes the kind of woman who is gentle without being weak, patient without being passive, and loving without being naive. This clarity allows her to navigate relationships wisely, to maintain kindness without tolerating mistreatment, and to keep her humility intact without sacrificing her God-given dignity. She remembers that even in times of trial, she is still a servant of the Most High, and that means her worth is not determined by people's treatment of her, but by her obedience to Allah, and her adherence to the principles of justice and honor He commands. Setting boundaries and protecting your dignity is one of the most important responsibilities you have towards yourself as a believer. And it is also an act of worship when done with the right intention. Allah has honored every human being, and with that honor comes the responsibility to maintain it. A woman who fails to set boundaries will find herself drained, disrespected, and taken for granted, not because she lacks worth, but because she has allowed others to treat her in a way that diminishes her God-given value. Boundaries are not about being harsh or unkind. They are about knowing where you end and another person begins, about defining what you will and will not accept in how others speak to you, treat you, and behave around you. In Islam, the concept of preserving one's dignity is deeply rooted. The Prophet Muhammad interacted with others in a manner full of gentleness, but he also corrected those who overstep. He showed mercy to people, yet he was firm in upholding truth and justice. As a woman, you must understand that protecting your dignity means not allowing people to use you, manipulate you, or cross the lines Allah has set for respect and proper treatment. Too many women are taught to believe that being a good Muslim means tolerating whatever comes their way, but in reality, Islam teaches you to speak up when you are wronged and to guard your honor. The Quran warns believers not to let hatred of a people cause them to swerve from justice, and likewise, love for someone should not cause you to abandon justice for yourself. If someone repeatedly disrespects your time, your body, your emotions, or your faith, it is not only your right but your duty to put measures in place to stop it. Boundaries are like fences around a precious garden. They are not meant to isolate you, but to protect what is valuable inside. Without them, weeds of toxicity, disrespect, and exploitation can take root and choke the beauty of your character. A woman with boundaries communicates clearly and consistently what behavior she will accept. She does so without aggression but with firmness, because she understands that clarity is an act of mercy. It helps others know how to treat her, and removes confusion. Protecting your dignity also means being mindful of who you let into your inner circle, because not everyone deserves access to your heart, your energy, or your life. Some people come into your life only to take, and without boundaries, you give them permission to keep taking until you are left empty. In Islam, self-respect is not arrogance. It is part of honoring the trust Allah has placed in you. Your body is an amana, your mind is an amana, your soul is an amana, and you will be asked how you protected them. The Prophet said, the strong believer is more beloved to Allah than the weak believer. And strength here is not only physical. It is emotional, spiritual, and moral strength. Boundaries are a sign of that strength. They show that you value yourself enough to say no when something is harmful, even if saying no is uncomfortable or misunderstood by others. When you set boundaries, some people will resist, especially those who benefited from your lack of them. But their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to uphold what is right and protect what Allah has entrusted to you. Even in acts of kindness, there must be wisdom. Islam teaches balance. You are not meant to give so much of yourself that you neglect your own needs, nor are you meant to serve others at the cost of your own mental, emotional, or spiritual well-being. Boundaries are that balance. They allow you to love others without losing yourself, to serve without being exploited, and to forgive without inviting repeated harm. They give you the space to grow, the safety to heal, and the strength to live with integrity in a world that constantly pressures women to please everyone at their own expense. Strength is part of faith, not opposite to it, and yet so many women have been made to believe that to be a good Muslim, they must be passive, silent, and endlessly accommodating. This is not the example taught by the Quran, or the life of the Prophet Muhammad. True faith is not about shrinking yourself to avoid conflict, or pretending you have no needs, desires, or opinions. It is about standing firm on the truth, fulfilling your responsibilities to Allah and His creation, and refusing to compromise on what is right, even when it is uncomfortable. The Quran is filled with examples of strong believers, both men and women, who faced adversity with courage. Maryam's Mary, peace be upon her, endured accusations, isolation, and immense trials, yet she remained steadfast in her devotion to Allah. Khadija bint Khuwaylid, the beloved wife of the Prophet was a successful businesswoman, a source of emotional and financial support, and a woman of unshakable faith who stood beside him when the entire world seemed against him. These women were not weak, their faith made them resilient. Strength in faith is the ability to say no to what displeases Allah, even when your heart desires it, and to say yes to what pleases Him, even when it is difficult. It is the courage to speak the truth when falsehood is loud, to hold on to your values when others abandon theirs, and to keep going when trials try to break you. It is not arrogance or stubbornness, but a firmness that comes from knowing your worth in the sight of Allah. A woman of faith can be gentle in manner and strong in will at the same time. She can smile with kindness and yet refuse to be manipulated. She can show compassion and still have the courage to walk away from toxic people. This balance is the strength Islam calls you to. A strength that comes from trusting Allah's plan, from believing that whatever He has written for you will reach you, and whatever harm He has not decreed will never touch you. Strength in faith means guarding your prayers, even if the world mocks you for it, dressing modestly even when fashion trends push you otherwise, and holding fast to the Quran and Sunnah, even when society tells you to loosen your grip. It is understanding that your life's purpose is not to please people, but to please the one who created them. This strength is not loud or boastful. It is steady, consistent, and rooted in conviction. It allows you to be calm in chaos because you know Allah is with you. It allows you to endure criticism because you know your worth is not measured by human opinion. It allows you to persevere in the face of hardship because you know that trials are temporary, but the reward of patience is eternal. When you live with the understanding that strength is part of faith, you stop apologizing for having a backbone. You stop allowing others to define piety as weakness, and start embodying the strength that the women of Islam before you lived with pride. This strength is what will protect your values, your dignity, and your relationship with Allah in a world that constantly tries to chip away at them. It is not something you are born with in full. It is cultivated through prayer, through knowledge, through surrounding yourself with people who remind you of Allah, and through taking one small stand after another, until standing firm becomes your natural state. Strength in faith is not just about moments of big courage, it is also about the daily acts of discipline, the little sacrifices, and the quiet choices that keep you aligned with Allah's commands. It is the foundation that allows you to remain soft-hearted without being vulnerable to harm, to remain forgiving without being taken advantage of, and to remain humble without being humiliated. Stop enabling toxic behavior under the name of patience is a principle every believer, especially women, must understand deeply because patience in Islam is a virtue, but it was never meant to be an excuse for tolerating wrongdoing, or allowing harm to continue unchecked. Patience, or sabr, is about enduring hardship with trust in Allah, remaining steadfast in worship, and resisting the urge to respond to trials with anger or hopelessness, but it is not about letting someone abuse you, manipulate you, or repeatedly cross the limits set by Allah while you remain silent thinking you are earning reward. The Quran commands believers to stand firmly for justice, even if it is against themselves or their loved ones, which means that part of faith is calling out wrongdoing, and putting a stop to it when possible. When toxic people in your life consistently display behaviors that harm you, whether it is emotional abuse, constant disrespect, manipulation, dishonesty, or disregard for your values, you have a responsibility to address it. Enabling occurs when you overlook excuse, or even protect harmful behavior, allowing it to continue without consequence, often because you fear conflict, rejection, or the loss of a relationship. This is not the patience Allah calls you to, it is self-neglect disguised as virtue. The Prophet Muhammad was the most patient of men, yet he never allowed injustice to thrive in his presence. He corrected people when they were wrong, even if they were close to him, because true mercy is helping someone change, not letting them remain in sin or harm others. Sometimes toxic behavior comes from people you love deeply, and confronting it feels like betrayal, but in reality, remaining silent while they harm you or others is a form of betrayal to both them and yourself. They continue in their wrongdoing because you make it easy for them to do so, and you continue to suffer because you confuse passivity with patience. Setting limits, speaking up, and walking away when necessary are not signs of a lack of patience. They are acts of courage and self-respect that align with the Islamic principle of removing harm. Allah does not burden a soul beyond what it can bear, but He also does not command you to willingly remain in situations that crush your spirit and destroy your peace. Patience is about enduring what you cannot change while striving to change what you can. If someone's toxic behavior is within your power to address, your silence does not count as patience. It counts as enabling. In many cases, enabling toxic people only reinforces their belief that their actions are acceptable, making them more entrenched in their habits, and less likely to seek repentance. By allowing harm to continue in the name of patience, you are not only hurting yourself but also contributing to the spiritual decline of the other person. Islam teaches us to enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong, and that starts with the situations closest to us. You must be clear about what you will tolerate and consistent in enforcing those boundaries, even when your heart aches from the weight of the decision. This does not mean responding with cruelty or revenge, it means responding with firmness, clarity, and a sincere desire for the well-being of both yourself and the other person. Walking away from toxic behavior is not a sign that you lack sabr. It is a sign that you understand your worth in the sight of Allah, and that you refuse to be a partner in wrongdoing by silently allowing it to continue. In doing so, you protect your dignity, safeguard your mental and emotional health, and open the door for the toxic person to face the consequences of their actions, which may be the very thing that leads them to change. Take lessons from the strong women of Islam, because their lives are not just historical stories to be admired from a distance, but practical blueprints for living with dignity, courage, and faith in the face of challenges. When we read about these women, we see that strength in Islam is not about harshness or dominance, but about unwavering commitment to Allah's commands, resilience in trials, and the wisdom to act with both firmness and compassion. Khadija bint Khuwaylid b. the first wife of the Prophet Muhammad was not only a successful merchant but also a woman who used her wealth, influence, and emotional support to strengthen the mission of Islam in its most vulnerable stages. She stood beside the Prophet when others doubted him, invested in the cause of truth without hesitation, and offered a sanctuary of peace that fueled his determination. Her life teaches that strength is in using your resources, whether they be money, skills, or influence, for the sake of Allah, and that true support is active, not passive. Aisha bint Abi Bakr Top another wife of the Prophet was known for her intelligence, sharp memory, and ability to speak the truth. She narrated thousands of hadiths, educated the companions, and clarified matters of Islamic law, proving that a woman's mind and voice are vital assets in the Muslim community. Her courage to speak, debate, and correct misunderstandings reminds us that knowledge is a form of strength, and that women have a responsibility to use it for guiding others to truth. Maryam Fifi, the mother of Isis, Jesus faced immense trials, isolation, accusations, and the miraculous yet challenging responsibility of raising a prophet alone. Yet she remained steadfast in worship and trust in Allah's plan. Her example teaches that strength is also in surrendering to Allah when the path is unclear, in holding your head high even when others falsely judge you, and in finding your worth not in the approval of people, but in your relationship with your Creator. Amara Noseba bint Kabala de the Farjua physically defended the Prophet in the Battle of Uhud, standing firm with her sword when many men had fled. Her story shows that strength can be literal, and that bravery in defense of truth is not limited by gender. Asma bint Abi Bakr Yishiyasar Stala displayed remarkable resourcefulness and courage when she risked her safety to deliver supplies to the Prophet and her father during their migration to Medina. She endured threats and even physical harm from the Quraysh, yet her determination never wavered. Her story teaches the strength of loyalty, quick thinking, and the willingness to bear hardship for the sake of Allah. These women's lives collectively dismantle the false belief that strength in a woman compromises her femininity or contradicts her faith. They show that being strong does not mean being disrespectful, but it does mean refusing to be silenced in the face of falsehood, refusing to compromise your faith under pressure, and refusing to live beneath the dignity Allah has granted you. Their examples prove that strength and softness can coexist, and that a woman can be nurturing yet unshakable, gentle yet brave, humble yet commanding respect. To take lessons from them means to internalize their qualities, to seek knowledge like Aisha, to support truth like Khadija, to trust Allah like Maryam, to be courageous like Nusayba, and to be resourceful like Asma. It also means applying these qualities in modern contexts, whether that's speaking out against workplace injustice, standing firm in your values when family or culture pressures you to compromise, or supporting a cause that upholds truth even when it costs you comfort. The strong women of Islam lived in different times and circumstances, but their principles are timeless, because they are rooted in Quran and Sunnah. Learning from them requires more than admiration, it requires action, because their lives are mirrors that reflect what is possible when a woman anchors her strength in faith. Use softness only when it serves Allah's pleasure, because softness in Islam is a beautiful trait, beloved to Allah and praised by the Prophet Muhammad. Yet like all virtues, it has its proper place and boundaries. The Prophet said, "Gentleness is not found in anything except that it beautifies it, and it is not removed from anything except that it makes it ugly," showing us that softness has the power to heal hearts, calm tensions, and open doors to guidance. However, the same softness that is beautiful when used for the sake of Allah can become harmful when it is misused. When it is extended to those who exploit it, when it causes you to compromise your faith, or when it allows injustice to flourish. Softness is a form of mercy, and mercy in Islam is always guided by justice. The Prophet I was gentle with those who were sincere, kind with those who sought truth, and compassionate with those who were weak, or in need, but he was firm and unyielding when faced with oppression, corruption, or mockery of the religion. This balance shows that true softness is intentional. It is not about being agreeable all the time or avoiding confrontation at any cost. Using softness for Allah's pleasure means being gentle with your family, your friends, and even strangers in a way that draws them closer to the truth, inspires them to goodness, and reflects the beauty of Islam. It also means withholding softness when it would encourage sin, enable harm, or send the wrong message that you condone what Allah has prohibited. Softness, when guided by faith, becomes a tool for dawah, for building trust, and for maintaining harmony in relationships. But when divorced from wisdom, it can lead to your own dignity being diminished, and your principles being weakened. Many women fall into the trap of using softness indiscriminately. Always forgiving without change, always accommodating even at the cost of their well-being, always smiling even when boundaries are crossed, believing they are fulfilling their role as gentle believers, when in reality, they are feeding a cycle of disrespect that Allah does not ask them to endure. The Quran teaches that Allah is both Al-Rahman, the most merciful, and Al-Adil, the most just, and we are meant to reflect both mercy and justice in our lives. Mercy without justice becomes enabling, and justice without mercy becomes harshness. The believer walks the path of balance. Using softness for Allah's pleasure requires discernment, which comes from knowledge, self-awareness, and a sincere desire to act in ways that align with His commands. It may mean speaking kindly but firmly when someone crosses a limit, offering forgiveness but not full access to your life until trust is rebuilt, or showing compassion without tolerating ongoing harm. It means remembering that your ultimate accountability is to Allah, not to people's comfort or approval. Softness in the right place can mend a broken relationship, encourage a sinner to repent, or bring peace to a tense situation. But misplaced softness can embolden wrongdoers, harm your own heart, and blur the lines between right and wrong. The women of Islam who came before us understood this well. They were gentle in nature yet fierce in defending their faith, warm in relationships yet unwavering in their principles. They gave their softness as a gift to those who valued it, and as a bridge to those who needed it for guidance. But they never used it as a mask to hide fear of confrontation, or as a way to avoid the discomfort of standing up for what was right. To use softness for Allah's pleasure is to see it as an act of worship, applying it where it brings about goodness, and withholding it where it would aid in wrongdoing, trusting that in both cases, you are acting with ihsan, excellence, before your Lord. A woman's worth is defined by Allah, not by the opinions, standards, or expectations of people. And this is a truth that must settle deep into the heart of every believer if she is to live with dignity, confidence, and peace. In a world where worth is often measured by appearance, material possessions, relationship status, or social approval, it becomes easy for a woman to lose sight of the fact that her true value is anchored in her connection to her Creator. Allah is the one who fashioned her with care, honored her as part of the children of Adam, and gave her rights and protections long before any society thought to grant them. The Quran repeatedly affirms that what matters most to Allah is not a person's wealth, beauty, or worldly status, but the purity of their heart and the righteousness of their deeds. When a woman understands that her worth is not dependent on how others see her, she becomes free from the exhausting cycle of constantly seeking validation. She no longer needs to conform to cultural trends that compromise her modesty, engage in relationships that erode her self-respect, or prove her value through achievements that have no weight in the sight of Allah. She knows that her worth was established by the one who created her, and it cannot be increased or decreased by human opinion. This awareness changes how she responds to both praise and criticism. She accepts praise with humility, knowing it is Allah who grants her any good, and she handles criticism with composure, filtering it through the lens of whether it aligns with truth, or is merely a projection of someone else's bias. Recognizing that her worth is defined by Allah also protects her from internalizing negative experiences such as rejection, betrayal, or failure. She understands that these moments do not diminish her value in the sight of her Lord and may, in fact, be part of a divine plan to elevate her in faith. This mindset allows her to maintain self-respect in difficult relationships, to walk away from situations that dishonor her, and to say no to demands that go against her beliefs without feeling guilt or shame. It gives her the courage to pursue knowledge, to engage in acts of service, and to use her talents for the sake of Allah without being paralyzed by the fear of what people will think. It also teaches her to view other women through the same lens, to honor them for their character, their sincerity, and their contributions, rather than competing with them based on superficial measures. A woman who knows her worth in Allah's eyes also knows that this worth comes with responsibility. She strives to live in a way that reflects gratitude for His blessings. She guards her speech and action so they align with His commands, and she seeks to grow in qualities that He loves, such as honesty, patience, generosity, and humility. Her sense of self is not fragile, because it is rooted in something eternal, and she understands that her life is a journey of worship, where every moment can be an opportunity to draw closer to Him. This understanding allows her to navigate a society that constantly tries to redefine her value, offering false measures such as beauty standards, career achievements, or social popularity as the ultimate goals. While she may enjoy and appreciate these aspects of life when permissible, she never allows them to overshadow the reality that her ultimate success is measured by her standing with Allah. She invests in her inner character more than her outward image, in her relationship with her Lord more than in public approval, and in the hereafter more than in temporary gains of this world. In doing so, she lives with a quiet strength, a steady confidence, and an unshakable dignity that no human being can take from her, because it was never given to her by them in the first place. True empowerment for a woman comes from aligning her life with the guidance of Allah, and the example of the Prophet Muhammad because any empowerment that is detached from faith is unstable, fleeting, and vulnerable to the shifting trends and pressures of the world. Islam grants women a form of empowerment that is rooted in their identity as servants of Allah, one that is not dependent on human validation or societal approval, but on the unchanging principles of the Quran and Sunnah. This empowerment is not about mimicking men or adopting values that contradict the teachings of Islam. Rather, it is about recognizing and fulfilling the unique roles, rights, and responsibilities Allah has given, and doing so with excellence, dignity, and strength. When a woman understands that her worth, freedom, and purpose are defined by her Creator, she stops measuring herself by the narrow, ever-changing standards of society, and instead seeks to live in a way that pleases Him. This allows her to walk with confidence in her choices, even if the world misunderstands or criticizes her, because she knows that ultimate success is not in being accepted by people, but in being accepted by Allah. True empowerment means having the courage to say no to what displeases Allah, even when it is tempting, and to say yes to what pleases Him, even when it is difficult. It means being strong enough to stand alone in obedience, rather than join the crowd in disobedience, and wise enough to discern between cultural practices that enrich her faith and those that contradict it. This empowerment manifests in every area of life, in how she dresses, in the relationships she maintains, in the career paths she chooses, in the way she raises her children, and in the way she engages with her community. It is the empowerment that enables her to seek knowledge because knowledge is power, and the more she understands her faith, the more confidently she can live it. It allows her to have a voice that speaks truth with wisdom, to stand up for justice without fear, and to use her influence to bring about goodness and prevent harm. It is an empowerment that does not require compromising her modesty, her morals, or her values, because it is rooted in the honor Allah has already given her. A woman who is truly empowered by her faith does not feel pressured to prove her worth by competing with men in areas Allah has not obligated her to, nor does she feel inferior if her strengths and contributions are different from theirs. She understands that empowerment in Islam is about fulfilling her God-given role in the best possible way, whether that role is in the home, in the workplace, in the community, or all of the above. This understanding frees her from the exhausting cycle of comparison and competition, allowing her to focus on personal growth, spiritual development, and meaningful contribution. It also gives her the resilience to withstand trials and setbacks, because her strength does not come from external circumstances but from her unwavering trust in Allah. This empowerment is not loud or boastful, it is quiet, steady, and deeply rooted, allowing her to move through life with grace under pressure, courage in adversity, and patience in hardship. It teaches her that leadership is not about dominance, but about service, and that influence is not about controlling others, but about inspiring them through example. When a woman embraces this form of empowerment, she becomes a source of light in her family, a pillar of support in her community, and an ambassador of the beauty of Islam in the world. She knows that every choice she makes is an opportunity to either please or displease her Lord, and she uses her empowerment not for self-glorification, but as a means to fulfill her purpose as a servant of Allah, seeking His pleasure above all else. Resilience in a woman's life is a reflection of her trust in Allah, and her ability to rise again after trials, heartbreaks, and setbacks, because life will inevitably bring moments that test her patience, her strength, and her faith. Resilience is not about pretending the pain doesn't exist or forcing herself to be unaffected. It is about facing the difficulty with honesty, leaning on Allah for support, and allowing the experience to shape her into someone wiser, stronger, and more connected to her Creator. The Quran reminds us that with hardship comes ease, and this is a truth a resilient woman holds on to when everything around her feels uncertain. She understands that trials are not a sign of Allah's abandonment, but an opportunity for growth, purification, and elevation in the sight of her Lord. Resilience allows her to keep moving forward when circumstances tempt her to give up, to keep her heart soft when bitterness tries to take root, and to keep her tongue in remembrance when it would be easier to complain. It is the quality that enables her to face loss with patience, betrayal with dignity, and failure with determination to try again. This strength does not come from within her alone, it comes from her constant reliance on Allah through prayer, dua, and remembrance. A resilient woman is not defined by the ease of her life but by the way she responds to its challenges. She adapts without compromising her principles, she learns without losing her values, and she hopes without becoming naive. She knows that resilience does not mean she must face everything alone. It means she knows where to turn for help, whether that is to Allah in solitude or to trustworthy people who will support her in truth. Her resilience also protects her from being crushed by people's opinions, because she has learned that human approval is fleeting, and that her worth is anchored in her relationship with Allah. She uses every hardship as a stepping stone, finding lessons in the pain and allowing it to refine her character. Even in her quietest moments, resilience is what keeps her heart steady, reminding her that Allah is the protector, the sustainer, and the one who will never let her efforts be in vain. It teaches her to look beyond the immediate struggle to the long-term reward, to see beyond the storm to the sunlight it will eventually bring, and to trust that every tear, every sleepless night, and every heavy breath has been counted by the one who knows her better than she knows herself. Resilience enables her to maintain her integrity in moments of pressure, to act with grace when she has every reason to be bitter, and to hold on to hope when everything around her tells her to let go. It is a shield that guards her from despair, and a force that pushes her toward the life Allah has destined for her, even when the path feels impossibly hard.